Hello, everybody. Welcome to All of It on WNYC. I'm Alison Stewart. Thank you so much for joining us today. Regular listeners of the show know I am obsessed with online petitions and crowdsourcing. The idea that people take time out of their lives to try to change something for the better is an idea I think we can all get behind. That's not to say we endorse or support any particular issue, but I can say we do endorse civic engagement. In September 2014, Jewel Brangman was driving a rental car, a 2001 Honda Civic, when she struck a minivan from behind. It should have been a minor fender bender, but the airbag in the Civic was one with recalled Takata airbags. The car had been under recall since 2009, yet it was still rented out to Jewel, and that airbag exploded, killing Jewel. Since then, Jewel's father, Alexander Brangman, has turned this tragedy into a mission to raise awareness about the safety issues around used cars in this country. A month ago, he started a petition on change.org targeted at a New Jersey law. The petition is called, quote, "Stop Car Dealers from Being Allowed to Sell Dangerous Recalled Used Cars." In it, he writes, "It's truly shocking, but car dealers in New Jersey are attempting to eliminate consumer protections in their state so they can get away with selling cars with deadly safety defects like the ticking time bomb airbag that claimed my daughter's life." The petition has received over 116,000 signatures out of the 150,000 goal, including someone named Rylan Levesque, who signed the petition and gave a really succinct reasons why. They wrote, "Car dealers shouldn't sell any kind of recall vehicle, period. If it poses a threat, they shouldn't put people at risk." The legislation that Alexander Brangman mentions in the petition is A4292, a bill that the New Jersey NAACP has also come out against. The organization tweeted back in August, "New Jersey NAACP opposes Bill A4292, a bill granting dangerous and unwarranted immunity to car dealerships." We were in touch with Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin, the sponsor of the bill. He was not able to get us a statement in time, but we will update our website if he provides one. Joining us now is Alexander Brangman, and in a bit we'll talk to New Jersey Spotlight reporter Carly Sitrin, who covers the State House, and Kathy Hennessy Riley, Director of Communications at New Jersey State Commission of Investigation. But first, we'd like to welcome Alexander Brangman to All of It. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Could you tell us a little bit about your daughter, Jewel?
Yes, I would like to talk about my daughter, Jewel. Jewel was an extraordinary 26-year-old girl with several accomplishments. I raised her as a single dad. She got her master's degree at Hofstra University back east, where you people are, in Long Island, and she moved out to California. She was a academic All-American, champion gymnast, a model, and an aspiring actress. And she wanted to pursue her PhD at Stanford for family therapy. She had gotten inspired when she wrote in her master's thesis. She wrote a published article on cyberbullying, but she decided to move out to California because she wanted to always be out here and pursue the performing arts for a year or so. She got involved with an A-list actor, a very famous actor, well, the son of a very famous actor as well. And so I decided to move out here to give her the support. And unfortunately, it ended in a tragedy. She was killed by shrapnel in a Takata airbag, from a Takata airbag.
Yeah, so for our listeners, can you explain exactly what happened? This should have just been this was like a fender bender, right?
Yeah, everyone else walked away. It happened September 7th on a Sunday. It stands out in my mind because we were vivid Giant football team fans. And out here in San Diego, I had to watch DirecTV to get the games, but the Giants weren't playing till that Monday night. Dallas had lost. She stayed with me a week here in San Diego, and she was going on a modeling event that Sunday. The event, we always had a very close relationship. As I said before, I raised her as a single dad. So she was always to text me when she got there. She said goodbye that day. She pulled over on the side of the road, as a matter of fact, in this rental vehicle, and said to me, "Dad, I love my life." Mm-hmm. And that's the last words that I heard, last written words that I heard from her. She went to the event. Fast forward around 8:30 that particular evening after I finished watching all the football games because the Dallas Cowboys lost. And everyone on the East Coast knows if you're a Giant fan, you hate Dallas. And I was very excited about that. And 2 San Diego police officers knock on my door. They asked me my name. They had my daughter's name, and they told me that I had to call a social worker at USC Trauma Center in Los Angeles because that's where her event was. Went through all the procedures to verify who I was, talking to a social worker and then talking to the head surgeons. The head surgeons asked me, was I alone, which I wasn't at the time. She asked me if I was sitting down. She said my daughter was in a very serious car accident. I asked her, did she survive it? She said, you need to get up here immediately. Now, where I'm living is about 3 hours from Los Angeles. I got there in about 2 hours. She described to me prior to leaving what I would see, and she was very accurate. I saw her hooked up to this monstrous machinery that was giving her life support, but she had already passed. She coded 3 times in the ambulance. They had said that because she was so young and beautiful and in such tremendous shape that they tried everything that they could possibly try. If it was anyone older or anyone not as gifted as she was, they would even just pronounce her at that particular point. So they tried to revive her life. But she lost 9 pints of blood. She was brain dead, and my life changed from that particular point.
Alexander, at what point did you realize that your daughter's death could have been prevented?
After I hired a high-powered law firm and pursued a lawsuit and under investigation, I got more of a deeper understanding of the Takata issue and the previous knowledge that they had faulty airbags. So, it was a few months after. It was a lot of investigation with engineers to verify if that exactly is what happened.
And when you started to look into it and your investigators started to look into the safety issues around used cars in this country, what did you learn?
I learned that they knowingly knew about this particular problem. I was a law professor, and, I had resigned from teaching law, so my background was helpful, and I understood breach, duty of care, injury causation analysis in a tort sense. So I knew that there was something wrong and something happened in that cabin. But there was nearly a 14-year cover-up pertaining to this particular issue with these particular dangerous airbags that are like riding around like ticking time bombs and like a hand grenade, because shrapnel explodes. And there were several injuries. There was an injury in Florida earlier on. There was some similar to my daughter Jules. It was extremely disappointing to know that this type of tort was being committed, and in this country, there's a history of that.
We had when we were talking about this petition, we thought you could actually rent or get a used car that has something that's recalled. That just seems wrong. It doesn't seem like it should be possible.
It's completely unethical, and that's why I found it necessary to become a national and worldwide advocate, because the general awareness of this particular issue, it goes unnoticed. People don't even know that they're riding around this. Millions of cars that are affected by this. They don't even know of the dangers that exist with this particular issue. It's a worldwide issue, as a matter of fact. And automakers have repeatedly put the onus on the consumer with regard to a consumer safety issue. December 4th of 2015, the Federal Legislation Safety Car Act signed into law. I supported that bill and shared my story with legislators because the rental car industry was not being governed on this particular issue. And when you have recalls in general, there's a general desensitized nature. People hear recalls, they don't respond to it, or they think it's not going to happen to me. I've done several interviews, nationally and internationally on this particular issue, and we find that to be a major problem with that. But when you have something preventable, okay, and you're putting profit over lives, that was something that I felt that I had to step up on, because even due to this is a tremendous loss for me because Jewel was an extraordinary young millennium that wanted to do positive things, and her promise was destroyed due to something that could have been preventable, and that was, in my opinion, completely unconscionable, nefarious, and unethical.
We're speaking with Alexander Brangman. He created a petition on change.org, stop car dealers from being allowed to sell dangerous recalled used cars. His daughter Jewel was killed in an accident with a car that was rented with a recalled Takata airbag. So why did you decide to head to change.org and to focus specifically on this petition aimed at our area in New Jersey?
Well, Rosemary Shahan of Consumer Auto Safety Reliability, she's an advocate that I frequently work with in Washington, D.C. and around the country, and she asked for my help in hoping that my personal experience and my story would put a reality light on the situation because, as I mentioned earlier, people are desensitized, and often you think it can't happen to you. I didn't ask to join a fraternity like this, like the 23 plus 24 others that have been killed, and thousands that have been injured, but I felt, I raised my daughter in a civic sense to always give back, and she, did that all through her academic training and her gymnastics and things of that particular nature, and I felt that it was time to change something that was a negative to a positive for others, and my main goal was to save lives. And when this bill was brought to my attention, I didn't hesitate. This is a very dangerous bill. It's not consumer-oriented. It violates a lot of rights. I know people in New Jersey. I know people all over the country. I'm originally from New York. So this is personal to me. The unfair, deceptive practicing acts that car dealers are operating under, the violation of expressed warranties, the tort liability of negligence and wrongful deaths that can be associated with this. So I found it imperative to step up. Although difficult, and this is a loss that's devastating to me, I felt it as a duty to bring awareness to this particular issue, and I think this bill points out some very serious liabilities that could develop in the state of New Jersey.
Have you heard from any state lawmakers from the state of New Jersey as the result of your petition, Alexander?
No, not at this particular point. The bill passed through the New Jersey Senate due to the pressure from myself, and I'm on a billboard with my daughter, and including several other safety advocates. But right now, it's currently on hold.
Alexander Brangman, thank you so much for sharing your story. We really appreciate your time, and of course, we're very sorry for your loss, but we appreciate the work that you're doing.
I appreciate your condolences, and thank you for having me, and I applaud you for bringing this to the spotlight that it needs to be put on.
Let's bring into this conversation New Jersey Spotlight reporter Carly Sitrin, who covers the State House. Carly, why doesn't New Jersey have more oversight on safety issues and protocols when it comes to used car dealerships, and specifically in this issue?
So I think that's a really good question, and one that I wrote a bit about in relation to an SCI report that emerged in New Jersey. And it kind of gets back to the question of where is money and influence kind of congregating around this issue. And I think it would appear to be that it's congregating towards bills that kind of loosen restrictions almost, or allow this issue to fester in the state, as opposed to around people that are trying to get tighter regulations.
Yeah, you've mentioned that you've written about this issue. Your piece is called Unsafe at Any Speed, and you start it this way. It says, New Jersey has long tolerated a specific type of used car dealership model that skirts the law and in many cases causes serious financial and possible physical harm to consumers across at least 3 states. What is this model and why? Can you explain it to us?
Yeah, so it's called an MDL, or a multi-dealer location, and it's basically a dealership model that allows a lot of used car dealers to obtain a license to sell used cars in the state without necessarily having a physical presence in the state. They can point to these kind of warehouses with a lot of cubicles and desks in them and say, we have a location, we're operating within New Jersey, but then not physically be in the state. And what's happening is the laws and restrictions around selling cars as is in New Jersey are pretty lax. When you sell a car as is, all the responsibility, 100%, is put on the buyer. In New Jersey's lemon laws, or laws that cover vehicles that are kind of sold used or have been repaired, is really hamstrung and doesn't cover cars sold as is at all. And so these large multi-dealer locations have kind of like thrived in the state as a way to, off-sell and hand off a lot of these cars that are questionable to purchasers who maybe don't have great credit or are unable to pay full price for something like this.
So to be clear, that it is not upon the car dealer to let you know if you are buying a used car that has a recall. It's all on the buyer.
I'll say I'm not super familiar with the recall laws, but as far as salvage inspections, sellers are required to kind of get cars that have been sold as salvaged, which means that they have been so damaged or totaled or wrecked that insurance companies consider them a loss and not worth the cost of repair. So these cars can be fixed and resold, but they have to be labeled as salvaged or rebuilt. And so these MDLs can and often do sell these salvaged vehicles, which again are ones that insurance companies have completely left for dead and instead are, not worth, the prices of fixing it up. And so what's happening is a lot of people are ending up purchasing these salvaged cars, driving them off the lot, and then in some cases running into issues on the highway where pieces are falling off, or in one case that the SCI report cited, a step up to get into the car broke off, severely harming an elderly woman who tried to put her foot on the safety bar to get into the car.
Since you cover the State House, are New Jersey lawmakers talking at all about these issues in terms of regulating car safety?
They are. I think right now there's a lot happening in the legislature. We have a sexual assault investigation ongoing, and marijuana legalization, and minimum wage laws, and so this has kind of gotten a little lost in the swing of things. A couple bills, and Assemblyman Paul Moriarty just introduced 2 bills this week in direct response to the SCI report that basically would establish a used car buyer's bill of rights, which would prohibit as-is sales of cars and would require dealers to offer contract cancellation option agreements for certain used vehicles. It also another separate bill in that same package would establish an 8-member state board of used motor vehicle dealers in the Division of Consumer Affairs, which would be responsible for licensing these car dealers and overseeing kind of the used car market overall. So those bills don't have numbers yet, and the language is still forthcoming, so it's not likely that this will get done in the near future. I also spoke to Senator Mike Doherty, who has another bill that has been introduced, which some say would actually loosen restrictions and make things a bit worse. And he was really candid with me in speaking about that bill, that there may be loopholes in the language, and there are things he is willing to amend and revisit and possibly kill the bill altogether. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty in Trenton right now over just what to do about this whole industry.
Carly Sitrin is a State House reporter for New Jersey Spotlight. Carly, thanks for sharing your reporting.
Thank you so much.
And for a little more context, we want to bring in Kathy Hennessy Riley, Director of Communications at New Jersey State Commission of Investigation. Hi, Kathy. We've been talking about the State Commission of Investigation report, this SCI report. Generally speaking, what does this report mean to the consumer?
Well, our report looked at a niche within New Jersey's used car industry, which Carly was speaking about, this kind of unique setup of these multi-dealer locations. So this is a sort of a sham setup for people who want to do business as car dealers in New Jersey. All you need is a building. You have a landlord who rents out these spaces. So it's not the traditional car dealership that you and I know. And what we found, we initially looked into this issue in 2015 and revisited the issue again in this report issued last month that found these places are a refuge for dealers who, engage in deceitful, in some cases unlawful activity, but a lot of schemes that impact consumers. And what we're talking about is, as Carly mentioned, these are folks typically who can't afford or who don't have the good credit to go to the regular car dealership. So they're sort of, stuck buying from these dealers who, are not looking out for their best interests. And what happens is a lot of these deals fall through the cracks because they're as-is sales, which means if it costs less than $3,000, guess what? You're on your own. So there's no protections in place. We had dozens of examples of folks who they tried to get some type of recourse, only to be told, sorry, the law doesn't cover your situation. So as part of our investigative report, we also issued recommendations, and our recommendations were to, do something to expand consumer protections. We actually said, hey, look at Massachusetts. They have pretty good used car lemon law that expands protections far greater than New Jersey's. So that's a place that New Jersey can look to model that. So, there are things that can be done that we felt that's an easy fix. Hey, in Massachusetts, the car can have up to 125,000 miles and can cost a minimum of $700. If they did those simple fixes, that could help a lot of consumers get some type of recourse.
Now, the report also states that people who worked at these MDLs were, quote, were able to profit from an assortment of questionable and unscrupulous activities at the expense of taxpayers. How so?
Well, we're talking about these landlords who rent these places out. It's pretty a sweet deal, if you will. You find an empty building, you construct a bunch of these, cubicles, and you have a pretty profitable entity. So you're basically housing potentially hundreds of entities that may be engaged in schemes that include tax evasion, insurance fraud. We're talking a black market in dealer credentials, and then not to mention all the consumer ripoffs. So these are havens that ultimately cost taxpayers because of the deceitful activity conducted by some of these dealers that occupy the spaces.
This thing is so layered. We're going from safety to health to tax evasion. What should consumers be aware of in New Jersey? Is there any way they can protect themselves?
Well, I think consumers need to know who they're buying from. What we found is a lot of these dealers, maybe who have a license at one of these MDLs, don't even live in New Jersey. They're actually New York residents in a lot of cases because it's much easier to get a license in New Jersey, particularly if you are based at an MDL. Hey, there's your location. So I think you need to know who you're buying from. If you have a buyer, maybe you found them on Craigslist or somewhere online, do a little research. Find out where they're licensed, because we found folks who were New York residents who bought a vehicle from someone in New York, had a problem with that vehicle, and then went to authorities to say, hey, I need some help, and we're told, sorry, we can't help you. That's outside our jurisdiction. They're not licensed in our state. So, that would be my first advice, is just to know who you're buying from and be familiar with, the consumer protection laws if they do apply to you. A seller doesn't even have to tell you as is sale. It can be implied. So know the laws and know who you're buying for, and I think you could help, save yourself some headaches.
Kathy Hennessy Riley is the Director of Communications at New Jersey State Commission of Investigation. Thanks so much for walking us through that, Kathy.
Thanks.